A few years ago, I went to visit India to do some work with D-Light and other social enterprises. And I went to a small village called Bareilly, which is 8 hours outside of Delhi. And that's where I met the guy in that book cover behind me, a spiritual leader who lived in a small house and had a solar lantern. This gentleman, his entire life possessions filled a box this big. He was happy, he had what he needed, and he didn't own a lot of stuff, but he did own a solar lantern. So the question that I asked the people from D-Light is this the person that you're seeking to sell these lanterns to? Let's roll back 20 years before that when I was starting out in the book business. I thought what I was doing was trying to invent books that I could sell to readers. It took me more than a year of failing before I understood that that wasn't my customer. My customer was the editor who acquired the book, because if the editor didn't get it, it wasn't going to get sold. And if it didn't get sold, it wasn't going to get to the bookstore. And if the bookstore didn't buy it, the consumer was never going to see it. There were intermediate steps along the way. So the lesson from both of these things is that even though the last thing I asked you to do was talk about what change you are seeking to make, I skipped a step on purpose, because we have to work our way into this. But the step I skipped is, who are you trying to change? If you're trying to sell, I don't know, backhoes, you're probably not going to sell many to a spiritual leader in a small village in Bareilly, India. If you're trying to sell luxury seaside mansions, you're probably not going to sell very many to people who work in the book industry in Manhattan. It turns out that getting really clear about who changes everything. Now, when I say who, you are probably visualizing a specific person. Perhaps you are visualizing a job title or a demographic. Demographics is the way we describe people from how they look on the outside. How old are they? What gender? What's their income? Where do they live? These are things that statisticians and sneaky internet marketers can find out about just about anyone now. But it's way more interesting to think about psychographics. What does that person believe? Who do they trust? Who do they look up to? What are they hungry for? What are they afraid of? What do they yearn for? We need to be really clear about the psychographics of the people we seek to change. That the more elegant we are, the more nuanced we are about understanding the personality and the dreams of the person that we seek to change, the more clear we are, the better chance we have of actually making that change happen. And this is where inexperienced marketers, and some people have been an inexperienced marketer for 50 years, making the same mistakes over and over again, inexperienced marketers trip up on this all the time. For two reasons. One, because they made something that they want, and therefore they assume that everyone wants what they want. Or two, because it's their job, and therefore our universal egocentrism says, well, I deserve it. Everyone should buy this because I need them to. So what I'm asking for is a little bit of humility and perspective. And then what we have to start with is not everyone wants what you want. And you don't want what other people want. You didn't buy an iPhone the first day it came out, probably. You don't own 400 pairs of shoes that cost $500 each, probably. You don't dedicate 10, 20, 30% of your income to charity every year, probably. But some people do those things. We have to acknowledge that no one sees the world we see. No one has the narrative that we have. But people clump together. And once we can find a clump of people that share a worldview, an opportunity to make the change they seek to make, then we have a shot at talking to them. So I mentioned the word worldview. Let's take that for a second. George Lakoff famously wrote about it in a lot of his work. What he is talking about are the biases and expectations that we have about the world. You see something happening, you assume it's like this. You hear news, you feel a certain way. Worldviews are clumpy. Lots of people share them. So that worldview, I trust new products, I fear new products. That worldview of, I believe in philanthropy, I'm skeptical about philanthropy. These are commonalities that we seek when we decide who we are trying to change. So I've just scratched the surface here, but we're going to keep moving this forward. So you've probably already guessed. First draft, we already heard what change you're trying to make. Today's assignment is simple but really difficult. Who specifically are you trying to make that change for and with? Who are you willing to leave out? Who are you going to studiously ignore? Because it's those steps that help us understand what's actually on offer here. Thanks.